are places to learn, places to play, places to inspire. Sadly, they've also become places of violence. As students and teachers prepare to go back to class, KETK News takes an in-depth look at safety and security, protecting East Texas schools. A KETK News special presentation.
Hi folks and welcome. I'm Neil Barton. This year, 2 mass shootings in our nation has renewed a discussion about the safety of our children at our schools. In February, a 19-year-old student killed 17 people at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Of the 17 who died, 14 of them were students and 3 were teachers. In May, here in Texas, at Santa Fe High School south of Houston, 10 people were killed and 13 people were injured. The 17-year-old shooter began his massacre inside of a classroom days before school was out for summer. After the deadly shooting in Santa Fe, Governor Greg Abbott was quick to respond. Days after the tragedy, holding 3 roundtable discussions in Austin, where he invited law enforcement, parents, students, experts, as well as victims. After those discussions, came out with his 40-point plan.
One goal in mind.
Governor Abbott, learning from those affected by the shooting during those discussions.
Every single item that I'm advancing today are items that were offered up in one of these roundtable discussions.
Less than 2 weeks after the shooting, presented a list of 40 action items to protect Texas children.
School hardening strategies, which includes things like metal detectors, as well as providing greater access for things like mental health and counseling strategies.
Abbott wants to install special alarm systems that warn of an active shooter on campus and suggests reducing the number of entries and exits on campuses.
We are also working to make it easier for students to anonymously report threatening or suspicious behavior.
House Speaker Joe Strauss and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick are already preparing for lawmakers to take action.
This will be Senate Bill 1.
Senator Eddie Lucio introduced legislation 2 years ago that would have created a mental health division in the state's education agency. It didn't make the cut. Patrick appointed Lucio to a new 9-member committee that will study violence in schools and school security.
Something that I would like to see, a uniform type of process that we can all be able to live with and count on, no matter what school, what the size of a school district is.
So today we asked the question here at home in East Texas. For that, we've invited a group of people that you'll see throughout the entire broadcast working and protecting East Texas schools. We began with Texas School Safety Board member and lawyer Paul Robbins, Texas State Representative from Nacogdoches Travis Clardy, UT Health psychiatrist Dr. Richard Adell, and Smith County Sheriff Larry Smith. Thank you all for joining us this day. We appreciate you being here. So a question right now for the entire panel, sort of overarching here broad. What do you folks think went wrong in Santa Fe? Mr. Clardy, go ahead. We'll start with you. You're a politician?
Well, like most of these tragedies, there are any number of things that, but for that, this wouldn't have occurred. A young man shows up in a trench coat in May. Maybe somebody should have noticed that and taken some action. A young man had a troubled history, obviously dealt with mental health issues. Perhaps we should have preempted that with some appropriate treatment and identification and help there. We don't know his home circumstance, and that's still developing, but you know, it's a preventable tragedy, and we need to do everything we can to make sure this stops in Texas and throughout our country.
I see the sheriff was shaking his head. Larry, you want to start with that?
I agree with what he's Representative Clardy is saying. The things that keep happening across the nation, and not just school shootings, but mass shootings as a whole, is that kids start making these outcries about they're going to do something and nothing is ever done with it. And even in law enforcement, where the information is not shared between one law enforcement entity and another, that's got to stop. And another thing too, of course, I'm sure we'll get to that, but you know, just imagine if the teacher there that used the basketball, if he had something other than the basketball to use.
Dr. Adell?
Yeah, I think early recognition and treatment is sort of the key, and you know, at times a lot of these kids present as outsiders and may not have the social connections or the family support to get them into treatment, and that's where I think at the school level, early recognition of the certain patterns, outcries of early violent behavior, being socially isolated, could help get someone into treatment potentially.
My opinion is we've kind of had a fundamental lapse in making security a priority.
over a long period of time, not just when it comes to school shootings, not just when it comes to mental health issues, but when it comes to an overall approach. We've built millions of dollars worth of school facilities with security sometimes not even being an afterthought, much less a forethought. And I think now we're dealing with facilities, we're dealing with society, we're dealing with mental health issues, we're dealing with a total lack of security that we've had for such an extended period of time that now we're having a great gap to make up to try to catch up. And so I'm glad that we're having these discussions. I'm glad that we're focusing on this. But even after the hurt's gone and the years have passed, we have to continue to make the security of our children a priority.
You know, everyone always talks about the guns, the guns, the guns. I think that's almost where the funnel ends. But are guns really the only problem with the situation? What do you think, Mr. Clardy?
No, not at all. You know, it's tried, but it's true. You know, guns don't kill people, people kill people. The problem is with individuals who, for whatever reason, find it necessary or have an impulse to go take other people's lives, harm themselves, and harm others. That's where we have to focus. You know, we have a proud heritage in Texas of protecting the Second Amendment, and I fully endorse that. But we've got to do a better job of fixing the real problem, and that is, how do we address and find it? I was very encouraged that Governor Abbott stepped out and pointed to the West Texas model. It's really an innovative approach, and they've had remarkable success out there. Identified over 100 kids who different levels of treatment were either taken out of the school. One of the things I heard the other day talking to law enforcement was, we don't have the tools to take kids out when we know there's a real and present danger to others.
And that's the profile. So once again, we come back to that. So it drives me crazy because as I read this, and I'm not an expert on this, you guys are, the profile, it's there. Nobody does anything about it. Who can do something about it? We invited the FBI to come here. I wasn't going to pick on them, but they knew all about it. They couldn't get a hold of the FBI office. If it's become an 800 line, like it has across the country, what to do?
Well, the truth of the matter is, we know this. You go into any teacher's break room on any campus, and they will tell you these are the kids we really need to watch. They know these kids. They're intimately familiar with them. We need to make sure the teachers feel comfortable. It's not tattling.
No.
It's a matter of helping these children get the attention and care that they need and avoid this. I really think that's a place we can start.
Okay, now who pays for the security in the governor's plan?
Well, I may defer to Paul on this, but I know that a bunch of the money is appropriated out of funds that are discretionary with the governor's office to pay for many of the programs that he's done. The West Texas program was funded through governor's discretionary funds. Long term, the state will pay for it. So these are taxpayer dollars, and that's another thing that people in our state are very careful about how we deal with, and that is to make sure we spend the money wisely. Let's just don't throw money at a problem to fix it. Let's come up with something that works, and that's where the Texas School Safety Center really has been a leading organization.
And that brings me to my next question. What is the Texas School Safety Board? What exactly, Mr. Robbins, is it?
Well, the Texas School Safety Center is a part of the Texas State University. It has basically a couple of divisions. One is a research division. And so when they make a recommendation, it's not because somebody just had a good idea or thought this was something they'd heard. There's actual research that's gone into this. They've developed minimum standards and best practices based on research. Now, that is implemented through the Texas School Safety Center itself. I urge everyone to look at their website because they have a vast number of resources. Everything from school safety issues, standard response protocols, anti-bullying, anti-tobacco use. There's just a plethora of different tools that they have, and these are provided free across the board. Free. And the Texas School Safety Center is over all the independent school districts in the state of Texas and the junior college system. Right. And so when the governor says we're going to do this, he means Texas School Safety Center.
All right. We appreciate that. Okay. Now, we all know the governor's plan is just the beginning of this process to secure our schools. When we come back, we'll take a look at incidents in East Texas and what local law enforcement is learning from these situations. Stay with us.
You're watching a KETK News special presentation, Protecting East Texas Schools.
And welcome back. We've taken a look at some of the tragedies that have affected schools across the country, but here at home we also have had some safety concerns as of late. Take a look at this map right here. These are just some of the threats students from local elementary schools to high schools have faced in the past few months. As you can see, districts from Diana, New Diana to Longview, all the way to Harmony have seen threats. Some ended in expulsion, some in arrest, as in the case of the Palestine ISD. Now, back in April, this district saw 3 threats in the space of a week, prompting lockdowns. 17-year-old Daniel Hayes was charged with a state felony. Now, these threats bringing home the reality that an incident like Santa Fe could happen here.
It's scary to think, do I send my child to school?
We're a small town, and we just can't let that kind of thing happen here.
Situations like this create panic, unneeded panic.
So joining us now to take a look at some of these threats, Bobby Brasher, the Director of School Security at the Brook Hill School in Tyler, Sergeant Gerald Coslin from the Smith County Sheriff's Office, Dr. Dan Crawford, Tyler Lee Head Principal, and Palestine Police Chief Andy Harvey. So, Mr. Harvey, we just saw what happened in Palestine in April. After your department saw these threats, how did you handle those threats?
Well, you know, mostly what we do, most of the time, is going to be reactionary, like we did in this case. Thank God that there were just threats and no one was injured. But I'll tell you what we've done since then, and we've done more of it, which is a very, very good thing, is increased our communication with the local school district. And that's way past overdue, right? We need to be in the same room talking about the same issues and not two entities. And really, when it comes to school safety, the school district and the police department must work as one.
Yes.
And that's what we've been trying to do there.
Anything else you want to add?
That's it for now.
Okay, because right now I'm going to talk about this, and this is a big player in this situation, I think. Social media has played a huge part in many of these situations. The panel saying yes. One of the most recent cases we've told you about, Lindale ISD there. The case of 7th grader Michael Hickey went from a classroom to a courtroom because he threatened 2 teachers by name on an Instagram post. Hickey now behind bars at the Juvenile Detention Center in the city of Austin.
Ensuring the safety of the community, our schools, and our children is our highest priority. This was not something that he just did without thinking about it.
All right, now, Sergeant Coslin, now we've spoken to you about this case before. What makes it different from other situations?
Well, here we had a young child or a young offender here make a threat on social media against 2 teachers. It was quickly brought to our attention. We were quickly able to identify the suspect, track down his social media posts, link it back to him, and make the arrest and remove that child from the school so it can no longer be a threat. We had a great response from the school district. The local law enforcement worked together on this, and we were able to make an arrest to prevent any kind of future threats. So the fact that the post was made and we were immediately notified of it was a huge success for us here in this situation.
We're always learning. What have you learned from this case?
That, like Chief Harvey was saying, building these relationships with our school districts, our teachers, our administrators, with law enforcement, so there's that trust factor so we can communicate openly, having those lines of communication. So when the teachers or the counselors or the administrators feel that they have a problem student they're aware of, that they can let us know on this. When they have any kind of an allegation, outcry from another student or anything, that instead of it being held there at the school, they pass that information on to us. So relationships are
You're
huge.
all shaking your heads. What do you think?
Well, he's right about relationships, and that's the key. And when we say relationships in schools, as a principal, we got to make sure that our students feel comfortable to come to us. They need to feel comfortable to come to adults. Well, communicate to them that we are there for them to keep them safe, that we're working with our police officers, our law enforcement, and that we care about their safety. And it happens daily where there's communication with them. We're reviewing our protocols so that they know, hey, they take this very seriously. And when an incident does come forth, and when those students are going to be the ones that bring information to us, and when they bring that information to us, we act quickly on it, then all of a sudden there's a step toward building greater trust.
And also, you guys are nodding your head when we're talking about the school district has to work with the police department. How do you make that happen? Let me ask the chief first of all, then Bobby got a question for you. How are you building this dialogue?
We have to go out and do it. I mean, just
so you had to get
stop
out
talking about it and
go in the school.
And matter of fact, we recently did that. And we all met in the same room. And I'm a firm believer, if we don't get all the people in the same room, nothing's going to happen.
It's like in anything.
That's right. So just like here, we have to get the people in the same room and talk about what's going on and really, really get down to ways for us to be able to prevent these kinds of things.
Now, Bobby, let me pick on you right now. You have a slightly different situation. Is it different on the private school level at all?
Correct. Well, you know, it's different, but it's the same. I would have to go back to Mr. Nichols and Representative Clardy because I agree totally with some of the comments they made. A lot of the schools, and I talk to schools all over because now schools are starting to really put a lot of emphasis on that and having a full-time person dedicated to that. But our schools, some built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they've been redesigned, they've been added on. They were never built to reinforce and defend, and that's what we're having to do. So the architectural piece is a problem that we need to work with. Also, Representative Clardy talked about the teachers. Teachers put their fingerprints on the kids every day. We started 5 years ago at Brook Hill with our school security plan, and it's fairly robust. But our teachers, we teach an in-service class in situational awareness, so teachers know what the red flags are, what to look for, how to interact with the students, changes in attitude, changes in moods, personal setbacks, are they isolated, their friendships, a whole psychological profile that we teach in service every year.
Okay, school or just workplace violence, whatever that we report here on KETK, copycats, we see it all the time. There's a bad shooting someplace or whatever, almost immediately the next day, a couple of days later it happens. How do you prevent that? Can you? That's kind of a loaded question, but what are your thoughts on that, copycats?
Well, one of the things that we teach when we teach our active shooter awareness for our civilians is unfortunately for you guys, not making a big social event out of it or a media event out of it. We have a policy here that if we have a mass shooting, we're not going to name the suspect because we don't want to glorify that person's actions.
And that has been named all the time, but I'm a member of the media. And let me tell you something, I would have no problem with that. The problem I would have is somebody down the line would do it. That's the problem. Maybe we all need to get together, sit down like this and talk and say, you know what, someone goes nuts, we're not making a hero or a tragic figure out of you. We're not even going to mention your name.
Absolutely. Because the last thing we want to do, you know, we're trying to find ways to stop these events from happening. If the copycat thing is a motivation, if these people who feel like they want to be somebody in this world and that's the only way that they can be recognized is to do this horrible act and they're going to get notarized and be on the TV and stuff, if we can take that away from them, well, maybe we'll stop those few people from ever doing this event.
Okay, being in school or being but with a badge, how has just the last 10 years changed the way you all do your jobs? Bobby.
Well, it started from spray paint and vandalism to going to the assistant principal's office to now we have video surveillance, we have emergency notification, all of our staff has them on their phone, we have trained armed responders, we have controlled access, and every one of our students has an ID that has to scan in to be able to get into a classroom. So it's just gone very heightened. And at Brook Hill, we have 5 dormitories and we have about 100 international students. So that brings us with I-20 visas and working with Homeland Securities and some of the high-profile students that we have makes it very important for us.
It's changed the way I do my job as well. You're right. All right, when we come back, testing the waters for red flag laws, a tough road facing lawmakers and what could be in store for gun rights in our state. Stay with us.
You're watching a KETK News special presentation, Protecting East Texas Schools.
And welcome back. Lawmakers are looking into whether to strengthen laws to include the so-called red flag notices. Now, this would let law enforcement family members and school officials or district attorneys to ask to temporarily remove firearms from a potentially dangerous person. 8 states have similar laws. It's all part of the governor's 40-point plan and the only piece that addresses firearms themselves. Recently, however, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick released a statement saying this in part, I have never supported these policies, nor has the majority of the Texas Senate. Governor Greg Abbott formally asked the legislature to consider consider red flag laws in May. However, Governor Abbott has since said he does not advocate red flag laws. So this. Representative Clardy, what does this now mean for the governor's plan, the 40-part plan? Let me ask you this. I've talked to some lawmakers, even they don't know the plan from the governor. Is this law or is this just a proposition?
Governor Abbott's plan was a very thoughtful plan. A lot of work went into it. Hours of testimony, experts in the fields from throughout the state. And I think they came together in very short order with a comprehensive plan that's going to make our schools safer and protect our children. One of the items was the red flag law. These are ideas that are put out for us to consider. I think Governor Patrick said that correct. It's to be considered. We all have concerns about protecting due process and equal protection under the law. That wasn't fleshed out in a 40-point, bullet point plan. So that's part of our responsibility as legislators to go there and let's see what the ideas look like. Right now is not the idea, it's not the time to start throwing options out. Let's get together, let's flesh them out, let's talk them through, and then come together with what's going to be best for Texas.
And again, it's not law, it's just pretty much a proposition,
That's
right? Okay, now, supporters say that red flag laws could have prevented the Parkland, Florida shooting, and the same has been said for the Sutherland Springs church shooting, leaving 26 people dead. Dr. Idell, do you think that's the case?
I think it's hard to say. You know, the implementation of a law like that would be very challenging. In part because the profile that we have is somewhat broad. It's kids that are estranged from other kids, outsiders that are oftentimes have difficult family lives. I think it becomes more narrow when you see the things that some kids are posting on social media, threatening acts of violence. And if the laws were designed around higher risk kids like that who are actually had documented threats of violence against others, then yes, I think that it's possible that that could potentially prevent violence. But it is hard to have a clear profile of what is a school shooter.
Yeah. Now, Joanne, I know you're with the Grassroots, We the People. Weekly, you send out an email about what you guys are going to be talking about or whatever. And from the tone, I think, of what I read of your last email concerning this, not everybody is happy or is all behind the governor's red flag point, right?
That's correct. And Governor Abbott has actually walked that back a little bit. I agree with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. There are not votes in the Texas Senate to pass any red flag petition laws. And, you know, we understand the problem. I think that going back to something that some of the other panelists said, I think that we need to start in elementary school, and I think we need to listen to teachers. Teachers know who the problem kids are, and they know from an early time
and
who
why
the troublemakers are.
Why do we listen to them?
I don't know, but you know, whatever you tolerate, you're going to get more of. and I know too many teachers who say that there are things that are tolerated in classrooms from an early age that administrators sometimes don't listen to teachers. So I think teachers are on the front lines and they need to be heard.
We're talking about firearms, the Second Amendment. It's a constitutional right. What scares me about it, because when it first happened in Florida, I thought, that's smart. Somebody was acting crazy. Someone should have got through there and grabbed the gun. However, then, you know, fear and common sense comes to bear, and I started thinking, who's going to make that call? Right. So can the police department or someone just say, you know what, they've always been a little wacky, been a little crazy. Some of us sometimes have all been wacky and crazy. So who's going to be the person, the entity, the council to say, you know what, Mr. Clardy, red flag?
It's a great question. That's a very reasonable concern. But let's be honest about our judicial system. We deprive citizens and people of their civil liberties all the time, but it only happens when the law is enforced correctly and due process is provided under the law by elected judges to make those decisions. That's what we're talking about here. I don't think there's anybody going to support you file a piece of paper saying take this guy's gun and we're going to go do it. I would absolutely oppose that, was I think nearly every Texan would. But now is not the time to say this has been walked back. We're not even going to have the conversation. Yeah. We cannot be afraid when we're developing public policy in the state of Texas to have the conversation. That's what we do in a deliberative body. We come down there, we hear the pros and the cons, we listen to the arguments, and then we make a decision and let everyone vote their district, vote what's best for Texas. And the governor can sign it or not. That's the process.
We mentioned before about somebody making this call. So Dr. Idell, what are signs that someone should be placed under this so-called red flag warning?
Well, again, I think the panel raised some good points about how hard it is to predict acts of violence and to deprive people of rights for behavior that might happen. But there are some commonalities. I think, really the history of violence, being outside of a peer group, demonstrated antisocial behavior, sometimes violence towards animals. Oftentimes there are posts on social media about preoccupations with violence or morbid thoughts of hurting others. So it's a combination of different things, but of the people who do all this, a very small percentage are actually the ones that actually commit the violence. So it's very hard to predict who is saying they're going to commit violence and actually who's going to do it.
All right, Doctor, thank you. After our break, we go inside the classroom. What do students and parents think? We'll talk to them when we come back. Please stay with us.
You're watching a KETK News special presentation, Protecting East Texas Schools.
I was scared for my life. Nobody should go through this. Nobody should be able to feel that in school.
It went through the back of my head and came out right here.
A teacher was telling us to go, 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 and then, it's like instinct. You're scared, you're traumatized, so you're running as fast as you can.
Gun control, metal detectors, check our bags, whatever you need to do to make us feel safe.
Welcome back, everybody. Those are the voices of Santa Fe and Parkland victims after this tragedy came into their classrooms and lives. We've showed you some of the biggest concerns that law enforcement and lawmakers are facing. So now we'll give you a view from inside of the classroom. So joining us again, Head Principal Dan Crawford and Mr. Brazier, all coming together to the panel, also Melissa Smith and her son Caleb. We appreciate everybody being here with us. So Dan, we'll start with you first. How easy is it to make a plan that the classroom will follow?
Well, the most important thing when you create a plan is to make sure you're evaluating the best practices and using your facility and evaluating what type of facility you have. For instance, at Robert E. Lee High School, we have an open air campus. There's quite a large campus. So we have to take a different approach where another campus might have a single or a double entry. We have very vast amounts of points of entry. So we've got to make sure that when we create our plan, we talk closely with our resource officers, our administrators, and then we bring in some experts, and that we look at basically what other schools similar to our facility has been doing.
Now, Bobby, you talked about this a little bit before. So once again, most of our schools, in fact, the schools that I went to as a kid in my hometown are still there. They were built back in the 60s and 70s and some in the 80s. So nowadays we have to start thinking about maybe perhaps building schools differently, right?
You can make
or reconfigure.
Yeah, you can make a school where you can't get into it. It'll be like DFW Airport. But then you lose the school atmosphere.
Prison.
So, you have to find that blend. I would definitely agree. We have 288 acres at Brook Hill, and so we have to try and use technology as well as training. Our plan, we try to keep it very simple because in an emergency situation, teachers have a hard time remembering exactly what to do.
We all do. Okay, once again, Robert E. Lee right now is going to have a renovation. Has this been brought into that fact?
Very much so, and what we're doing is spending time looking at new technologies from the aspect of monitoring everything from social media to movement within the school to any type of alert systems that we might have that can use to give us quicker response time. We've also been able, this year we're very proud that in looking at this, we're doubling our police force at Robert E. Lee High School and in the district, hiring 4 tactical officers that will also be a part of our force, and they're going to be working with us in the development of our plan that we'll use at our new school, which will have a single point of entry, which will be much different than what we currently have.
I got you. All right. Now, Melissa, so far we've talked to the politicians here and the law enforcement people, all very valuable input there. But your mom with the kid in school, what would you think would be a big help?
Just be aware, make sure that you're seeing what the kids are doing, monitor their social media. And like I told him, if someone tells you through a text or through Snapchat, or just if you think they're joking about doing something like that, don't just take it as a joke. Let a parent know, let the principal know, because you never know when these kids are being serious and when they're just joking around.
I want to hear from the moms, because I'm sure you're friends with other ladies and gentlemen who are your friends, your son's friends. And what are you guys talking about? What is the main source of concern in your life right now when it comes to this matter? I know you have some opinions about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's scary. You expect to send your kid to school and them to go and to be safe, and then you hear of all these shootings and you don't want to think that it can happen at your school, but you never know. It could happen at your school very easily, and so you just want to keep the line of communication open with your kids and just make sure you know what's going on in their life. Check their Facebook, check their social media, because you don't know what they're doing if you're not checking it.
That's right. So Caleb, how are you and your friends feeling about this matter? Do you feel safe in school?
I do feel safe, but we did have a recent scare at my school recently that did kind of put us on edge a little bit.
And what school do you attend? Once again, tell us.
Troop High School.
And so what exactly happened?
A student sent a text around saying that a school shooting was going to happen at a specific time, and it was taken care of by the school immediately.
Yeah, that's good. But when that happens as part of the student body, there's rumors and this sort of thing or whatever. What happens and what do you think should happen? Because you're very, very important. You're the reason why we're talking tonight. Students.
I think the students have the right to be able to go to school and feel safe in their environment, and I think there should be more precautions about, how the guns can get into the school. Like maybe, I don't know, metal detectors I think is like a good idea just through the entrance.
Let's talk about safety drills. Back in my day we just had fire drills. Do you have safety drills for this sort of thing there when you go to school?
Not that I know of. I don't think we've gone through anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see stuff like that happen.
Bobby,
soon.
What about you guys?
We do. I'd like to circle around to one other comment that we were talking about here is when teachers find out, school personnel find out, a lot of schools we found don't have a mechanism to report this.
Really?
Teachers will be talking in their lounge like Commissioner Fleming said, but there's not really a mechanism. So we built a mechanism to be able to have that, so we can pass that information along to Bullard Police Department or to Smith County Sheriff's Department, where we have great relationships with them. You can pick the phone up and you can call and say, we're hearing this. But the teachers at the ground root, from the classroom, for the students, up through the administration, need a formal method of mechanism to be able to report this so nothing slides through the cracks.
Okay, now the shooting started inside of a classroom there at Santa Fe. How do you keep a person with a firearm from getting all the way back to the classrooms? Should we stop at the front door? What should we do?
Well, like I said, it depends on your facility as well. But if you have your students, our students, we monthly have lockdown and fire drills. We do that very routinely. We have a schedule that we set out that only a few know about. But the key is arming the students with knowledge so that they know what to do when an incident like that happens. When it comes up, they immediately know what to do. The teacher knows what to do, and we're communicating that. When that goes into play and we get them out of harm's way, then we can put our officers or armed personnel and the appropriate personnel into the locations to try to stop them as quickly as possible.
All right. Now, bulletproof backpacks have become popular among parents and students. Superior Firearms in Tyler sells these backpacks, and of course we have visited with them before on East Texas Live. You're looking right now at a demonstration of their product in action. Austin Rohr is the owner of Superior Firearms in Tyler. He now joins us to show us what parents need to know about these devices. So, Austin, how well do these devices work, and what should moms and dads know?
So one of the first things we did whenever we were reached out to carrying something like this is we actually tested them. So before I would even
you tested them yourself?
Yes.
And so I see a bullet hole right here.
So we have two different plates. Before I'd even sell them, we took them out to the range. This plate holds up to a 44 Magnum. As you can see, we shot it here with 44, and it's nothing there. This weighs less than a pound. This plate here.
So this would be very light inside of a backpack.
Yeah, very light. I mean, it's like a spiral notebook.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea, this plate here will actually stop a .308 or 5.56 bullet, which
is a rifle bullet.
Rifle bullet. A regular textbook weighs around 5 pounds. That weighs 3.2 pounds.
This is a bit heavier, but when you consider the circumstances, it would be worth it.
Correct.
It would be worth it. So what do you have over here?
So this is just your standard backpack here, and to show you how easy something like this would be is you could put it in there just like you would your normal textbook. And the whole thing is, the way these are trained is if something was to happen, the students would have something to hold on to be able to block them from it. Is it 100% no, but it's definitely better than having nothing.
Are these very expensive?
No. This one here is 69 bucks. And
69.
69 for this one here, and then the rifle rated one, which I would, recommend if you're going to do it. They are 169.
Okay. So what are parents saying so far about this? People happy with them, or pretty much? I mean, nobody really wants to do this, but considering.
Exactly. So we've had a huge response on it. We also have a briefcase version of it too.
Oh, really?
That are sold for teachers, and that's been the one that I've actually sold out of several times, and we're working on getting some more in. But that one folds over like a bulletproof vest.
Oh, really?
And on the front, it'll say teacher.
How much is that?
Those go for $229.
$229. So far, what have you sold the most of? Once again,
these right here have been sold the most. This plate here, and not only parents are coming in asking for them, but then also just business professionals are coming in for them too.
What is the biggest issue you've seen so far with these things?
I think it's people say, well, it's not going to happen here. Tyler's small. These are big towns. It's going to happen. And that's where, we get the biggest people that hold back from buying it is because they don't want to buy it for the kids just in case something was to happen. They don't want to think about it. But now we're seeing some of the parents that didn't want to buy them to begin with. Another shooting or tragedy happens and they're coming back in.
Anything else in development that you can share with us besides this, or maybe they're making them lighter, or what else?
So they're actually making backpacks now that have Kevlar built into them.
What are these made of?
This is Kevlar here. This is triple woven Kevlar. So there's actually some other technology out there, but as of right now, this is still your best bang for your buck without spending thousands of dollars.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate you being with us. All right, when we come back, we ask what is next, and we hear from you. We'll be right back.
You're watching a KETK News special presentation, Protecting East Texas Schools.
Now, before we look at the next step, we wanted to know your biggest concern going into this brand new school year. So Jill wrote this: how to keep young kids safe and out of trouble joining in on the bus when it's shared through primary grades through high school. Barbara thinks the biggest issue in campuses is, quote, bullying. We invite you to stay on this topic as well and share your thoughts with us and your concerns. You can go to our Facebook page, that is KETK NBC. All right. Joining us once again, Mr. Robbins, Representative Clardy, Dr. Adele, and Sheriff Smith. Sheriff, a couple of moments ago, you wanted to add something about profiling kids who may be prone to this sort of thing.
Well, what I wanted to talk about was we were talking about in one or two of these school shooting situations, or one was a nightclub shooting, was the passing of information from a federal entity to the local entity, and it not being done in a very quick manner. Yeah. And I can tell you, I've worked for two federal entities. I retired from a federal entity, and I can tell you from my experience that the federal government is not the best to have that information up front. It's the local law enforcement that's plugged into that school district, and it's the SROs, the school resource officers, that are plugged into there that need to have that information and need to have it in a timely manner. And another thing that we're looking at doing this school year coming up within the Smith County Sheriff's Office is the campuses in the unincorporated part of the county is to do more check-in passings. In other words, when we have a patrol officer deputy going from point A to point B and it passes by a school and they're not answering a call, they're to stop and check in the school, and not at certain times, just whenever they go by there. Another thing we're working on is we have a Smith County Sheriff's Office app, and I'm now working with the app provider to have drop-down boxes for every campus out in the unincorporated part of the county, to where we can receive information in a timely manner of when there's bullying going on and things of that nature, that we can get with the school district on and work that out before it turns into a major problem.
Sounds good. All right. The question on our minds: what is the single most important thing we can do to protect East Texas schools? And we'll talk to Mr. Clardy about that. What do you think?
Well, first thing you do when you have a problem, you have to acknowledge you have it before you can solve it. We need to stay committed to this process. I think for too long we've put our heads in the sand and hope it'll go away. It'll never happen here, and that's just not the case. I grew up in the generation where there were guns on campus. They were hanging up in the back of the pickup before you went bird hunting that afternoon. It's a different place. I wish we still lived in a society where mom and dad read the Bible to the kids and prayed with them, and the kids knew their ABCs. They showed up, and the worst thing somebody did was chew gum in class.
Or run down the hole.
That's not our world anymore. So what do we do to deal with? These are serious issues. I'm proud to serve the Texas legislature with some very serious members and strong leadership from Governor Abbott, and I really think we're going to come up with some solutions that make sense and incorporate all the elements of mental health, law enforcement, and deal with the students and get back to what we should be doing, talking public education, and let's talk classrooms. How do we grow the next best generation of Texans?
All right, Dr. Adele, what do we do? How do we fix it?
I agree. I think education goes a long way, both in regards to bullying, which may be a huge factor when it comes to, in certain cases, in school shootings, and mental health stigma as well, so that people, instead of hiding from problems with depression, anxiety, or rage for whatever reason, are actually seeking help either through the system, with their families, with friends, but being more open about problems before they turn into this explosive rage and violence that sometimes happens.
Mr. Robbins.
Neil, we've got to develop a comprehensive progressive plan, not just a static plan that seems to be a quick fix. We have to implement plans. We have to fail at some of those plans. We have to reevaluate, and we have to change those. But as far as a comprehensive plan, we can't just look at one aspect. School shooters. We need to look at all aspects of safety, and we need to look at the uniformity and consistency. We're about to spend a lot of money both on the federal and state level on school security and school safety. But what we need to have is a comprehensive plan so we don't have Chuck in a truck show up, sell a bunch of equipment, and then all of a sudden when we have a natural disaster that maybe takes out our command center in a county, the next county over can't administer that because their equipment is incompatible, the software is incompatible. We need to establish some principles, we need to establish some protocols, we need to establish some standards and some best practices, and we need to have an overall comprehensive plan before we start building the safety mechanism.
Thank you all. We appreciate that. We thank you very much for joining us for this hour-long special. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. It's good to talk about these sort of things, put our words into action. Be vigilant. If you see something, you say something. Many times in my business, the news business, people call us, contact us to look into a matter. The problem is, then they don't want to get involved or go on the TV camera. The topic we just covered concerns everybody. And as always, we welcome your comments. You can go to our Facebook page, KETK NBC, to give us your thoughts. Thank you very much for watching.